Welcome to Convergence. Albert Einstein said among the most difficult problems in all of physics was the Earth's magnetic field. My name is Michael Doran. I'm a California attorney, and I'm going to argue that the Earth's magnetic field is among the most difficult problems in all of biology. Today we're going to talk about the Antarctica blue whale. It sounds like just from the surface that this has nothing to do with Earth's magnetic field. But this huge creature, some think that the Antarctic blue whale is among the largest animals ever. Has nothing to do with Earth's magnetic field, but I'm going to make some arguments that it's very profound in the Earth's magnetic field. And so let's start out with the fact that this animal, as we're coming to learn, like other relatives of it, we believe migrates with the Earth's magnetic field. So we're talking about dolphins migrating, other types of whales, and this whale, I believe, is no different. That the Earth's magnetic field, it's sensitive to it. So we have that. The other thing that we have is, again, I'm talking in terms of mechanisms about carbon dioxide in cloud droplets in the context of magnetic fields, both DC and AC fields, and then that changing cloud microphysics, and then ultimately affecting lightning patterns, and then those lightning patterns affecting the Earth's magnetic field. Now, just like El Nino occurs of interest only during the winter time, and this is the biggest climate cycle on Earth, the southern oceans are really interesting in the wintertime from an electrostatic standpoint. So let me draw a picture. If we're looking at the Earth from, excuse my art here, if we're looking at the Earth from the South Pole, and you have Antarctica, which looks kind of like a brain with a tail, there's an ocean around the Antarctica called the Southern Ocean. And it's surrounded by cold salt water. Well, salt water is highly conductive. And when the Earth is tilted in the wintertime so that the tilt that is closest to the sun and tilted up towards the sun, and the Southern Ocean gets the most sunlight, this is when salt water, the warmer it gets, the more conductive it is, becomes very interesting as a common for the entire rest of the oceans, whether we're talking about the Atlantic, the Indian, South Indian, or the, both South and North Indian are connected by this common, or the Pacific. All these oceans have this common conductive place where currents can flow. And again, the warmer the currents, the warmer the salt water, the more conductive it becomes. So the southern oceans in the wintertime, for us in the northern hemisphere, but in the southern hemisphere's summer, that is a time when that ocean is the most conductive. And what we know, and what we're starting to see, and this is a convergence topic, is that lightning patterns, 90% of lightning occurs over land, and that just has to do with the mechanism of lightning, how it works. And you have basically three main land. You have South America, you have Over here you have Australia, New Zealand, and then you have Africa, and Cape Horn, South Africa. And this isn't to scale, it's a terrible drawing. But what I want to kind of demonstrate is if you are reviewing lightning patterns like on the worldwide lightning network, what you'll see is that during this time of year in the winter, it's early February, no, it's Valentine's Day today. So still winter time. And with the tilt of the Earth still towards the South Pole, it's warmed from most of this period of time being solar facing, and you get these lightning patterns, and the lightning patterns are mostly over land. So electrostatically, because there's a common, the common of the Southern Ocean, you get lightning over the Central Pacific, a pattern of lightning over the Central Pacific. Now, what does that have to do with the blue whale? So what I'm saying is that carbonation gets into clouds and affects cloud behaviors, affects the freeze rate, how fast the freezing occurs, because in fields, the structure of the freezing, the supercooled water, or the structure of the freezing ice is affected by the electrical field and the carbon dioxide content. So a surface flow picks up carbonation, like if you're shaking a beer and cracking it open, particularly over colder oceans, and then that gets into clouds, and it affects the way the clouds behave, affects the way the winds underneath behave. And my argument is that this is a dampened system, meaning that life comes into play. It has come into play since life first formed as nucleotides, where the nucleotides also in ice droplets could be a collective model and collective feedback solving the Earth's magnetic field. Once again, if the Earth's magnetic field is too strong, we become a dead planet like Jupiter or Saturn. If it's too weak, the atmosphere gets stripped away by solar winds, by space weather, and you get Mars, a dead planet. So life has modulated or dampened this Earth's magnetic field. And this puts selective pressure on life as a whole. Now, how would that be expressed? Well, exactly as I'm about to explain. Blue whales, the largest creature on Earth, maybe the largest creature ever, they're 90 feet long, 100 feet long. They weigh many tons. Their heart is as big as a small car. And they eat primarily one food, krill. And the krill are tiny little creatures which eat phytoplankton. So you have this connection to carbon dioxide where the phytoplankton the krill eat the phytoplankton, which is basically like a simple plant. And the krill, instead of evolving to be like toxic to other creatures, it is among the most nutritious omega-3. And you can go to the health food store and buy krill oil because of the omega-3. It's so healthy for you. And so instead of evolving this defense against being eaten, the krill are a particularly nutritious food. Why? Well, because there's selective pressure by their role in a living Earth, an Earth that's electromagnetic and modulating or dampening the Earth's magnetic field. If they aren't nutritious, then basically the whole ecosystem gets killed by their sophistication of being not nutritious. They have incredible selective pressure to be eaten by creatures that maintain the Earth's magnetic field and maintain their ecology. So And some survives, but a lot of them are their purpose in modulating or dampening the Earth's magnetic field is to be nutritious for the whales and for other creatures. Now, what do the whales do? Basically, what we're talking about, whales, not so important in their bodies themselves, but the whale poo they produce. So they take the krill and they convert it into whale poo, and that whale poo is high in carbonation, it's focused, they read and sense Earth's magnetic field and currents, and so they're there for decarbonation events precisely by the calculation of this creature with a massive brain. I'm going to play for you some. So on the website that's called antarctica.gov.au, which is Australia, they have some stuff about the blue whale. And some of the interesting things they're talking about here is the calls. So for instance, the D-call. The D-call recorded from a sonar buoy deployed in the northern Ross Sea and sped up 4 times to raise the pitch to be audible to people. D-calls are thought to be social calls made by male and female whales on feeding grounds. D-calls are highly variable across individual and across seasons and years. I was just hitting my cell phone and playing the sound for you. And it's again sped up 4 times. This allows the call to go through the water for huge distances. This is just one of the calls. The reason I'm playing it for you is because what have I talked about in prior episodes? I've talked about the fact that the Earth's magnetic field is subject to lightning, which is like a hammer on a bell that causes these resonances. One of the resonance, the fundamental resonance, is the wavelength around the entire Earth between the ionosphere and the Earth. These are ultra low frequency waves, resonances actually, and this is what nucleotides evolved against. So just like our brains have Schumann resonances, and just like the atmosphere has Schumann resonances, the whales have a massive brain, they too have resonances. And so it makes sense that their language is in terms of resonances, and actually low frequency resonances is just not really a surprise. So I just gave you what is called the D calls. Now I'm going to give you an FM calls. Blue whale FM, frequently modulated calls recorded from a sonar buoy deployed these are all credited to Brian Miller, probably again from this Australian source, from a sonar buoy deployed in the Ross Sea in 2015. FM calls seem to be associated with animals and groups and may be shorter range social and foraging sounds. This is not as loud. Again, very low frequency. So low frequency sounds, but probably on the higher end of low frequency because it's about talking to the animals when they're fairly close to each other. Okay, so now I'm going to go to Antarctica blue whale Z calls, recorded in the Antarctica Division moored acoustic recorder on resupply route to Casey Station in 2014. The sounds are sped up 8 times to rise the pitch. Z calls can be heard from long distances and seem to be produced by individuals, possibly for longer range communication. So I'm going to play this. 8 times sped up. So this again is low frequency. We're talking about low frequency that is again consistent with this idea that there are resonances in the atmosphere and that the brains of the whales evolved from nucleotides that were created in this, again, in this context of resonances, low frequency Schumann resonances in the atmosphere. So now, having said this, let's talk a little bit about the climate implications. You say, well, what does this have to do with climate? Well, the Antarctica blue whales were extremely numerous in Antarctica around the turn of the last century. And their populations were thought to be around 200,000. And then in the early 30s, they were hunted massively. And this happens to correspond to the death of 12 million Ukrainians in 1933 and the Dust Bowl in the United States. And if you can imagine that there's an organization in the wintertime that precedes the rainy season where you get these quadrants and you get some dampening that's going on that maybe helps to amplify that signal. If all of a sudden you don't have that source of carbonation, you can then expect to be disruption in climate patterns that are more or less normal. Now, I argue, of course, additionally, and it's like all biological systems, you have redundancy, but there was massive dams in the 30s on the Hoover. On the Colorado with Hoover, and in Ukraine, in its major river, there was a massive dam built near Zaporizhia, and that also at the exact same time, and then corresponded with the horrific drought and famine that killed 12 million. Now, many people blame the Russians, but there's no dispute that, like in the United States at the same time, there's a horrific famine and ours is a Dust Bowl in the United States. Theirs was a famine. Now, what's going on now? So here we had mega fires in the United States. Also in the 30s, there was a solar cycle and a solar minimum. The solar cycle has two parts to it. You see the sunspot cycle go up and down at about every 10.5 years. But after one cycle of sunspots, the sun's magnetic field flips over. So in a way that the full cycle is going through twice. And the minimum corresponds to the magnetic field and the solar winds and the solar energy spreading out from the sun, and then between the ebbs and flows of this, when it's minimum, this allows cosmic rays to come in from space and be very high during the solar minimum. And in particular, during the Dust Bowl, you were at the solar minimum, very much like we've had from 2018 to just this last year. And we've had all these mega fires and droughts, and the Colorado's about to go dead pool. Here in California, very dry, fires over much of Europe. Well, so you see that there's an input. This is a typical type of input that would have to be dampened by a dampening system. You see a defect in the dampening because the whales were killed. You see rivers dammed up, which also changes the feedback that hydrology brings in terms of carbonation and nutrients in the oceans. Unlike during the Dust Bowl, around the world, humans have started to use fossil fertilizers that are outside of the biosphere, the active biosphere, and injecting them into the active biosphere. So you're starting to see things like the dead pool near the delta of the Mississippi, and other types of reaction to use of fertilizers. So it's not just the dams that are changing when rivers flow stuff into the oceans, but it's also the content of what's flowing. We're changing the ecologies everywhere and for different ways. But what also is occurring as these changes, specifically to the blue whale, is the food source that the blue whales eat. So there's been a little bit of recovery from, say, the 200,000 blue whales that used to exist. Now there's only a couple thousand, or it's like 1% or 2% of the population is of the blue whales from what it was. But they're a species that have started to become protected, and they're making somewhat of a comeback. But since the 70s, the ice has been reduced so much in Antarctica, and for other reasons that are not, I don't think are understood yet. The krill population since the 70s has decreased about 80%. So the food source of these animals, and ultimately the connection to phytoplankton, and that's what some think is the cause of the loss of the krill, is the reduction of the ice related to phytoplankton has reduced, and then that has resulted in the loss of the krill. So you see then these particular patterns of lightning that would be produced just by the fact that land is where it is. Then you don't see the dampening that would occur with the whale poo and the krill and the phytoplankton. You don't see the biological dampening, and then it's not surprising that you're seeing megafires and so forth that occur with an input, a electrostatic input into the Earth's climate system. What else can we say about the blue whale? Well, there's a few things that are interesting to me anyway. They're extremely intelligent. Again, migrate, in my view, with the Earth's magnetic field. They would be sensitive to where these quadrants of lightning occur. They would be sensitive to these undulations we're starting to see. So let's talk a little bit about the undulations. What I use, and I see it live. So you can do a simple search. It's null surface winds, Google, Yahoo, whatever you want to use. And it'll come to this website called null. And this is where convergence comes into play. I mean, it's literally not that long since spatial computing was invented. And when spatial computing was invented, there wasn't the computer power to be able to use these features. But now computers, even cell phones, have become so powerful that spatial computing can be supported by your cell phone. So you go to this website, the internet speeds are high now, and you can pick up this picture of the Earth, and it shows the surface winds on it, and you can toggle using spatial computing around the globe and just look at what the winds are. And what I like to do, and which is available right on my cell phone, is what you can do. So I'm going to go right to the website. So again, I'm just going to make a search. I'm going to go to the Yahoo. I'm going to go null, N-U-L-L, surface winds, and I'll do a search. It's literally the first thing on. It's the Earth nullschool.net. And it looks like this. I don't know if you can pick it up on the screen here, but that is the website. It's a picture of the Earth. And I mean, this is literally real-time Valentine's 2023, dating myself a little bit with my blunders. And I'm literally seeing undulations all over this. Where I pick up undulations is when I move my fingers through this really fast, it doesn't fully load. The spatial computing doesn't fully load. And here, right south of Alaska, in between Alaska and Hawaii, is a beautiful undulation. And I don't know if you're going to be able to pick it up, but that's what it looks like. And this is again from the Earth Null School. You can see the undulations with your own eye. This is clouds actually being changed by electrical fields, in this case Schumann resonances. And the freeze rates changed in these electrical fields sets up patterns that it's just implausible. It's completely unlikely that any other force of nature could cause perfect sine waves in these clouds. There's no other reasonable explanation, particularly in light of what I'm just describing to you of this electrical complexity. So you can imagine, and as I'm toggling, particularly interesting between Antarctica and South America that kind of have this peninsula and tail, that these act for these large-scale, low-frequency undulations or resonance, Schumann resonances. It acts like an antenna and picks up these signals. And so you can imagine that, and as I'm looking at this website and toggling and it's blurring it, you see these undulations all around South America. And I'm sorry, not South America, Antarctica. And I wish I could blow it up for you here. I'm going to try a little bit to show you an undulation. And this would be, okay, this is close to Australia, south of Australia. And there's an undulation. I don't know if you can see it. I'm just doing this real time on this website. They're always there. So you can go yourself, anyone can go to the Null School website and toggle around and blur it. In the wintertime, you go, if you're doing it like I am right now, you can go to and toggle to Antarctica, and you can see the undulations with your own eyes. This is public domain internet stuff that anyone can look up right now. And what I'm saying to you is that here you have a creature with a massive brain that already signals with other creatures. It's with with other blue whales in frequencies, and here's a frequency that's going to be in its environment, and it's it's Schumann resonance. If you go to the worldwide lightning network, it's also kind of on topic and fascinating, just another measuring source of what I'm talking about. They will not only show you where the lightning is, but how they're figuring out where the lightning strikes are. And how they do this is they use triangulation in different places where the lightning strikes. And so they'll have say a lightning monitoring station in Sydney, and what it looks like is undulations that get triangulated, and that's how they figure out where the lightning is. Well, it just means that undulations are going through Sydney, and it's the same thing that the whales are picking up. They just sense this and are able to process this, unlike we are. Okay, hope you like this episode. Please like, please subscribe. Have a great day. Thank you.